Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Pemko number 336 and 335 set of weather stripping. And these pieces are a set or sold individually, but you would use them as sets only, although they list them as individual pieces. Of interlocking weather stripping that would be used quite elegantly on the push side of a door, where you have a component that mounts to the door and a component that mounts to the frame, and these items are intended to interlock together so as to provide a very nice seal on the face of the door, and that seal is used to positively stop the intrusion of not only air, but I've sold it to people who have used it to stop things more severe, like the very occasional but ever persistent extreme weather condition. So here's what we've got, and this video is going to cover both of the different pieces in both of the different finishes, individually and as a set. So we've got two pieces. One is in the D finish, dark brown. The other's in the A for mill aluminum. And let's go over the two pieces individually. First of all, what we're dealing with here is the 336 component. This L angle is the 336 piece. Again, each piece is available in the A finish for mill aluminum or the D finish for dark bronze. And the L angle component, which would be mounted to the jamb on the, this would be mounted to the jamb on the hinge side and the header, but then on the strike side, this has to be mounted to the face of the door. Okay, and what we're going to do is go over the dimensional properties of these items, and then we're going to talk about exactly where they'll be installed. So the overall width, or I should say projection, of the 336 component looks like it's 1/2 inch with an overall width of about 11/16. This is just a 12-inch sample piece. That's all this is. If this was the genuine article, it would include screws that would have a slight, that it would have a very shallow head, and they're somewhat ovalized, slotted to allow for a little bit of movement on the opening. Okay. Now we have the 335 component, and that is basically a surface applied piece of material that has a bird's mouth type feature to it, so that, and you probably guessed it, so that the 336 component can nest right inside of it, staying with the bird theme. Okay, that's how that works. But of course, in an actual installation, it would work this way. Okay, so it's going to look just like that. Then you have this inserted piece of sponge. I'm quite sure that it's sponge neoprene that's in here. And sponge neoprene, yeah, it's definitely sponge neoprene, which is going to be more appropriate for sound attenuation than being impervious to water, being that it's a sponge. So it will have higher properties for sound attenuation. I would think they would use a sponge neoprene over closed cell, open cell neoprene sponge, closed cell neoprene, like a diver's wetsuit might be. That's a bad analogy, like a car tire would be. Because the sponge neoprene is going to be more flexible than a piece of material that's likely 3/16 in diameter, which of course you can pull out. That's just inserted, you know, by hand is all that is. Because you're certainly going to want some flexibility to work to your benefit there. Okay. Now let's move on. Okay, moving on with the dimensional properties of the 336. According to the drawing, that we've got 1 3/16 overall width. Okay, you've got an overall projection of about, just heavy on 3/8 as you can see. And this item will also include screws and a complementary finish. These holes on this sample are not slotted, and I would not find that irregular at all, that they're not slotted. And in fact, I would say that a slotted hole would be quite disadvantageous, because these two items are going to continue to make contact under pressure with each other, and you don't want that compression action to be compromised because of the fact that this item has slotted holes and will creep over time. So that would be normal for that. The downside of that, of course, is your holes need to be spot on. So you're going to want to, before you drill and secure, you'll certainly want to double check and then use a center punch, so that when you put your drill bit to pre-drill the hole, you're nesting into the proper area without that drill bit walking at all, whether it's wood, steel, aluminum, fiberglass, stainless, bronze, whatever you're drilling into. So now the question becomes, what is the application? I had said earlier that we had the hinge and the header were different than the lock side, and let's discuss that. Okay, now moving on with our application discussion. Where are you going to install this material? I had said earlier that on the lock side, the hinge side needs to be installed differently than the header and the lock side. Okay, I don't recall if I had said that correct or not, but we're going to discover the correct way right now of how to do this. Now, this material, since it operates like this, you might start to think to yourself, well, I don't know if that's going to work on all three sides, because if you have this attached to the door on the hinge side, the door needs to rotate. It needs to pivot on its vertical axis of pivoting. So that really wouldn't work in this sort of scenario. However, in a latch side and header, this item can be applied to the jamb and this to the door, because the door will literally just simply approach it like this and close. But that's not the approach on the hinge jamb, which is why it has to be different. So let's tackle the easy one first, the lock side and the header. This portion needs to be attached to the face of the door, because when the door closes, it's going to just simply come into that bird's mouth and seal in the same condition at the header. So what we have in this case, and I have a sketch here that we're going to fill in. I'm going to include now the hinge. And obviously this is just drawn just freehand. There's your hinge. So your door is going to swing this way. Now the easier side to get our head around, I think, is the lock side and the header. And what I'm drawing here is what it's going to look like on the jamb and the door as it relates to the latch side. Now, I've sketched in this area here. You can pause that video if you want to study it, and by all means. So you can get the concept. When my pivot point is over here, you can get the concept of how that's going to move. However, if you imagine drawing that on the lock side, on the hinge side, you can see we're going to have a problem, because this will need to rotate, and it's not going to work. So on the hinge side, we need to do it differently. so that it looks like this. So to make a proper interlocking installation, this is what it must look like. So in essence, on the hinge side, this is the face that's going to be mounted to the door, because what happens is this will quite easily, simply because it doesn't have to rotate, because this is actually moving out of the space. This is actually opening up wide, and that small amount of relief in that bird's mouth area gives it simple, adequate clearance to make all that work, so that it actually works like that. Okay, really nice, complete interlock that it makes there. Now, it's unorthodox, I suppose, to split up all those pieces, and certainly it is. And you're going to have to be mindful about the meeting styles, the top of the jamb and where it meets the header, so that you most elegantly put those pieces together. Run one long, or notch them in such a way to minimize the gap that you're going to encounter. But that's how the installation of this needs to work. Now, having said that, if you're doing interlocking weather stripping, there are other models that will allow you to interlock at the on the exterior of the opening as well, where you basically will have a hemmed over hook and the same L plate, but when you put it on the pull side, there's no way to make that work well, you might be able to, you're certainly going to be able to make it work in your, install the Pemko, their part number 347, then the finish, let's say 347A, and then there's 68AR. And basically what that system is, and you can search that in our site, I'm just quickly sketching it here. Or it's a two-piece system that looks like that, where it's mounted to the pull side of the opening at the header, and it acts as a drip cap. But even if you had this L angle and this sort of 90-degree hemmed over piece, there's no way to make that work on the hinge side, because there isn't an adequate bird's mouth relief over here. Now, if that was, I suppose if that was shaped aggressively like that angle here, you could make that work. But it's not, and actually that would probably work out very well. So this interlocking material is installed on the interior of the door, which, you know, if you have an in-swing door, that's great. That's where you want it. I think you want to have the line of defense as close to the exterior as possible, because if you're applying the material to the interior of the door, let's say that you've got doors that swing out. Here's an application. 20, 30-story condo building in Florida, and the stairwell doors literally have direct exposure to the exterior. And they're exterior doors in that regard. So the rain can hit that directly. Because they swing out or into the stairwell area, you can have the interior side of that doorway a finished area where it's a corridor to the units, carpeting, drywall, the whole 9 yards, electrical. When you've got the weather stripping on the interior of the space, you know, the water's already gotten through the seam of the door, but that logic would be something's certainly better than nothing to have in that sort of scenario. And weather stripping that sort of door for that sort of extreme event where you've got horizontal rain is really the challenge, but I think the logic comes back to something is certainly better than absolutely nothing. Now, let's move on to how to order this material. So these pieces are listed in the site as not only individual pieces in lots of different lengths, but in sets as well. So that is a common item to have them listed in sets, even though it's not necessarily something that we have all pieces listed in sets. Sometimes you need to pick up the components individually. The point of all of this is to make sure that you're ordering the proper quantity of pieces, because they're listed individually and as sets. Okay, so to get on with it, each the 335 and 336 are listed individually in the site in piece lengths, and then in sets. The piece lengths are there because you might have an unusual application where you are doing a window, and it's, you know, a 3 foot by 3 foot window, and you need to literally detail the individual pieces. That's why you might need to do that. Now, I had called the manufacturer there to find out that the replacement neoprene is available, that sponge neoprene, and that is a part number R5BL that we have down here. So we will have that material listed in the website as well as a replacement item. Now, listed in the site in lots of different lengths, everything from 2 foot to 8 foot lengths. And you can have longer than that. We just don't list it because the cost to ship longer than 8 foot lengths is generally prohibitive. If you needed one 10-foot piece, the freight's going to be costly because it can't go package service. But if you needed 50 pieces or 100 pieces at 14 feet, the freight's not such an issue. If you have need for custom lengths, by all means let us know by ordering the next longest piece or pieces and simply indicate in the comment field the net length that you'd like for us to cut the material back to. The reasoning is this. Imagine this was a 4-foot piece and you needed to cut it back to 44 inch. You would eliminate that slotted hole that's there. You'd be then stuck drilling a new hole, and drilling a slotted hole is not simple. But then you would have the requirement to ream that hole out if you so chose to. And then your center to center would not be symmetrical down the length of the unit either. The point is, no big deal to cut aluminum. However, you may not want to have to cut it in the field. The factory is already cutting it from very long extrusions, something probably like 16.5 feet. So you cut it or the factory cuts it, someone's probably going to have to cut it, because if you order a 3 foot by 7 foot kit, those sizes aren't going to be 36 by 84. They're going to have to be trimmed down to account for the stops, things of that nature. So regardless of which way you go, we'll be happy to supply it pre-cut to the lengths you specify, giving you that slotted hole at the proper distance from the edge and the proper center to center as well. And of course, that would go for the bird's mouth piece as well, which is the 335. Okay, same sort of logic that we have there. Finally, there is a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Pemko products that we sell, but a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Pemko 335 or the 336 in either the aluminum or dark bronze finish, or any other Pemko product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.